Should the Old Testament texts be applied as is? The Catholic answer I say right away, she is. No, they must be applied in the light of the gospel that gives them meaning. This notice is not shared by all Christian churches. And I would like to show the difference. For example, with certain American evangelical currents, in the first part of the Old Testament, before the Babylonian exile, there is something that runs with the Jews, namely that if they served with all their heart, so we are blessed with blessing. A psalm said it. The just man will die old with many children around him. And so in these evangelicals, it is said that if one believes in God, then all that one will ask, even materially, will be granted. So that when someone is poor or falls into unemployment, it is because he did not serve God. In fact, Jesus does not read that he who asks will be given because God. And as a father he does not give a snake to whom he asks for a fish. Well, this conception is for Catholics very false. And even for the Jews, because it must be remembered that the Bible is therefore a growth of understanding. There was at one time exile to Babylon. And this exile was all the more upsetting for the Jews as it happened, when an extremely just king had just taken power, King Josiah, who had restored the Jewish people in all the faithfulness to Jewish law. This is how the Jews themselves discovered that misfortune could fall on righteous men. And it's the Job book that tells it. In pain they do not understand why. And God does not give answers in the Old Testament. Well, it is Jesus in the New Testament that gives the answer by explaining that all that happened to the Jewish people in their flesh, so for example at a certain moment, material wealth, meant as a parable, what was to happen to prove that the just man, even if he is in material misfortune, is sometimes filled with spiritual goods, whatever happens, with persecutions. But even these persecutions, what Jesus adds, well, they comment that his soul will be like a garden full of the grace of God. Then to this some object the text of Matthew 5th chapter verse. He knows everything. Jesus says, do not think I came to abolish the law or prophets of the Old Testament. I did not come to abolish but to fulfill. In truth, before heaven and earth pass, a point on an I of this law will not happen unless it is accomplished. And well, Jesus solves this objection himself. It suffices to read the rest of the text, when it says, for example, in relation to violence, you have heard from the ancients, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and I tell you not to resist the violent ones. And if anyone wants to sue you, give him your coat. Then some people responded at that time, we apply the gospel text materially as it is, so we do not defend ourselves more when there is an injustice of committing. It is not that either. And let's remember one last time. Catholicism is not a religion of the book alone, taken materially, but from the book with the living interpretation of the Catholic Church. For example, if Adolf Hitler wants to take your coat in 1940, and there, because he takes an iron sword, you have to take an iron sword, of course. And it's not so much for the history of the mantle, it's for the story of the innocent life, which is endangered by this monster. On the other hand, the text means that it must be done 100 for Hitler's soul. It is necessary to pray for his salvation, and that the misfortunes which have struck him, the loss of his power, at a given moment, perhaps that they have marthe, bring them at the end, at the hour of death, to amends and to be converted.